I absolutely love the Android Auto Apple CarPlay devices for navigation, controlling music, especially when I'm traveling. But they have one annoying fault, and that is they inexplicably drop the connection with my phone. So through my own observations, using these devices and additional research that I've done, I can explain why some of that is happening and give you one perfect solution to overcome the drop connections. Hey, how's it going? Welcome to my channel. So real quick, I just want to get out of the way. This is a sponsored video. However, this is not going to be a review of this particular navigation device. The company that provided this agreed to let me do this video in trying to determine why these devices are disconnecting through my own observation and research. So since they did that, if you are interested in this particular device, I'll leave a link in the description below. But as far as this specific device, that's all you're going to hear from me about it. Now, if you're not familiar with the Android Auto Google CarPlay devices, I'm going to give maybe 30-45 second overview of what these do. So these devices connect to your phone via Bluetooth and provide you with navigation. So Google Maps or whatever the Apple Maps software is, it will appear on here. So you can set your location and do your navigation off of this device using your phone, but without having to have your phone in some sort of mount where it's going to be vibrating around. The sensors are going to get destroyed over time, or it's going to overheat from the sun, which is a very common thing with the phones, at least that I use. The other thing that you can do with this is you can control music if you listen to music while you ride, and you can control phone calls. And then if you get text messages through many of these devices, the text message will show up. Now, my vision is not good enough to read it. And frankly, while I'm riding, I shouldn't be reading text messages on this device, but I can look at it real quickly and see who sent the message to determine whether or not I should pull over. So that's what these devices do. Now, the really annoying problem with these devices, and it is not isolated to any particular device, is that they drop the connection with cell phones. In the research that I was doing, I saw both iOS users and Android users complaining that these devices are dropping connections. They didn't understand why. In addition to that, even the Android Auto and Apple CarPlay devices in vehicles and cars are known to drop the connections. And I had that experience this last weekend. I was driving out in the Bay Area visiting a friend and trying to get into Oakland and to the airport where I was flying out of. And of course, it dropped the connection at a very critical time. So this is universal across all these devices that they drop the connection. In the research that I've done, I have found a few things where I have experienced the most drops. There is a corollary reason. I cannot say definitively that that is the reason why this is happening, but through observation, I think there are some reasons for that. Now, nothing I'm going to provide here is going to be scientifically based. I don't have an anechoic chamber. I don't have multiple RF devices where I can saturate this to see if it's going to drop its connection in the same type of conditions when we're out riding around. So I'll go over the environment in which I have observed the most drop connections, and then the research to support why I think I'm losing those connections in those environments. So let's get to that. I've been using these devices for the last year, and I have about 18,000 miles of experience, both with 3 different devices, this one and then on my 2 other bikes. And when I started losing connection, I really started paying attention to the environment around me because it was happening so frequently. And it was causing issues of having to pull over, turn the power off to the bike, turn it back on. It was very annoying. So I wanted to try to determine what was causing it. So what I have found in my experience is in urban areas, when I get into cities, the connection is more likely to get dropped. And there's a few things that could be causing that, but the totality of what is causing that, what I'm going to say is there are just a lot of signals out there. So we'll get into that a little bit further down. So the other thing that I observed is some of the times it was repeatable. I rode through CarPlay in South Park, Colorado. Yes, that South Park, 4 different times. And they were doing construction at one of the intersections there, and they had set up temporary lights. Every time I went through there, I would drop the connection. And I experienced it 4 different times, different months, as I was traveling in and out of Colorado. So there's something about that setup there that was causing the drop connection. The other area that I really started noticing was going through wind farms, where the wind turbines are. Every time I entered an area that had a lot of wind turbines, I would drop connections, and I would have continuous drops as I was passing through and around those wind turbine farms. The other thing that I noticed that was not as easy to replicate was the signs that tell you how fast you're traveling, either it be the temporary mobile ones or a more permanent mounted sign. I did have issues going past those where I would notice it would drop the connection, but it was not every time. And even if I rode back and forth past that sign, it may not do it every time on a particular area where I had noticed a drop. I don't have an explanation for exactly why that is happening, but there are some things signal-wise coming from those that may be causing it. And the last area where I really noticed it every time I passed through a Border Patrol checkpoint, especially in the southern states along the border, almost every time, at least every time while I started observing this or paying attention to it, I would lose the connection. That's probably due to a few reasons. One is there's a lot of communication signals in those areas because there's just a lot happening, a lot of sensors, a lot of communication with other Border Patrol checkpoints. So those are the areas where I had noticed it the most. When I was riding backcountry discovery routes all summer, I rode, I don't know, 8 or 10 different sections through 6 different states last year. I never had a drop connection. It's very remote. There's no other signals out there. It's just the bike, the phone to the device with nothing else interrupting it. Never had an issue. So I really think it is a condition of a lot of signals compared to areas where there are no extra signals. So let me get into the research that I've done and explain each of these points. So when we talk about being in an urban environment, there are a lot of RF signals everywhere. I mean, you have people all over the place having their own Bluetooth devices that are around, and then depending on the strength of those, you have a lot of different radar signals that are around, like just opening and closing doors at grocery stores, things like that, that could potentially couple with this device. And when it couples with it, it could be interrupting the signal. I don't exactly know, again, because this is unscientific. I don't have an anechoic chamber to saturate this with different signals to see if it drops. But in an urban environment, there is just a lot going on. And I think it just doesn't take much to interrupt that connection for it to drop. So really nothing you can do about it. When you're in those environments, it's going to happen. And again, like I said, it's not just these devices for motorcycles. Automobiles are also suffering that same disconnect. When I was doing my research, I just kind of threw it out there trying to see if wind turbines or wind turbine farms have electrical signals. Or initially I was thinking that it was the communications between the towers, if they were telling them to turn on or turn off, and maybe that some sort of microwave communication was interfering. But when I was doing the research, it said just the wind turbines itself create large electromagnetic fields and can interrupt communications and navigation signals that are basically being used by your phone. So it is interrupting your phone and the sensors in it if you're close enough to those towers. And some of the wind farms that I have ridden past, I am incredibly close. Riding through eastern New Mexico, West Texas, and different parts of California. And it seemed to be pretty consistent anytime I went through a wind farm that I would drop a connection. And in some cases, I was dropping the connection so frequently, I just basically left the navigation device off until I cleared wherever that wind farm was. So it was pretty significant. and was something observable, and it appears that that was one of the causes for the drop connections. When I was in CarPlay and was having the drop connections at that intersection, the temporary lights, additional research when I was looking into it, and it also applies to the signs that are telling you what your speed is. So the speed checking signs, whether it be mobile or permanent, is a couple of things. One is maybe the radar itself, but that doesn't seem very likely because the frequency range that radar is operating at is outside of what the Bluetooth is, unless for some reason it is coupling with the device itself and causing interruptions in it. But what I was reading is that the traffic signals and also the radar, the speed, the signs that tell you the speed that you're traveling at, they are connected remotely for programming via Bluetooth device. So it is possible that those are continuously emitting Bluetooth. And I don't know what the strength of that would be, but in the research that I was doing, it indicated that that might be enough to interrupt the signal either from your phone or from the device, because all of a sudden now your phone is seeing a new Bluetooth signal. Not that you can connect to it, but if it's doing a continuous scan, it's going to pop up and it might create just enough of an interruption for you to drop that connection. It's speculative, but my observation is those are one of the common places where I find that I'm dropping connections. So unfortunately, based on my experience and the research that I've done, there is really nothing that we can do to prevent the drop connections from these devices to our phones. But there are a few things that you can do to make it better. And one of the recommendations was keeping your apps on your phone up to date, and then also keeping the firmware on these devices up to date. I'm lazy about that. I rarely update my apps unless it requests it, and firmware on these devices, I'm not likely to take the time to do that. So there is another solution that I do recommend, and it's from learning the hard way of what to do. I don't recommend wiring these directly into an accessory port that's going to be based on your key of your bike. If you put it on the key where you have to turn your bike off completely in order to cycle the power, every time you have a drop connection, you are going to be incredibly frustrated because you have to pull off the side of the road, turn the bike off, turn it back on, make sure it makes a new connection, and then take off. Because the one thing you don't want to be doing is while you're riding, trying to go through the menu and reconnect. And I have tried to do that, pulling off to the side of the road, going through all these menus, trying to get this device to reconnect to my phone. And it has been incredibly difficult. And I found the fastest and easiest solution: cycle the power. Now, what I have done is I have added these auxiliary switches to two of my bikes that have this device so that I can cycle the power to this device while I am riding. So just if I see a drop connection, I flip the power off, give it 30 seconds, a minute, and then power it back on. The great things about these, if you were in the middle of navigation, it will pick up right where you are, show you where you're at, and then take off. So you don't have to worry about resetting your navigation, putting in a new destination, or anything else like that. It'll just pick it up and go. So my number one recommendation for solving those disconnects is wire this into your battery or off the auxiliary so that you don't have to cycle the power to the bike, where you can cycle the power on this independently. Do that. That hopefully should make your experience a lot better, and just understand you're gonna drop connections. It's just the way it is. I think the functionality of these is so good that I don't mind that, especially when I'm riding backcountry discovery routes, because it doesn't happen when I really need it, and that is riding in those conditions. So anyway, if you have experiences with this, or maybe you have your own solutions, or maybe you figured out how to keep these from dropping connections, leave that in the comments below. I know in some of the reviews I've done, I've seen a lot of comments of some very frustrated users. So, whatever your experience is, leave that in the comments below for others. And if people are considering getting one of these, they can take a look at your comments and see whether or not it's something they want to do. I definitely think this is better than a dedicated GPS, because I don't have to update the maps. My phone does it, and I don't have to take this off, take it in, plug it in. I just let it be. So thanks for watching. Get out, do some riding, ride safe, and I will see you out there. Remember, you can always make more time, but you cannot make more money. So get out and do that ride you've been thinking.